More on the story.
Mayor Marion Barry, with his wife Effie at his side, walked to a church across the street from their home today, where the mayor, in a dramatic appearance, finally faced up to the shocking reality of his arrest on drug charges.
The events of the past few days have been the most difficult of my life. More difficult than fighting my way out of poverty as a black youth born in the segregated Deep South. How I wish I could trade this hour. So I announce today that I'm going to find a way to begin to heal my body, mind, and soul.
The mayor fought back tears as his wife, in a show of solidarity, praised Barry for having the strength to admit his weakness.
It's truly a burden that has been lifted from our souls.
In all of the emotion of the morning, Barry never admitted to a drug problem. His representative avoided the question.
The most serious problem involves alcoholism.
Insiders say the mayor may not want to speak out on drugs yet because of plea bargaining efforts, that he doesn't want the videotape played in public, which allegedly shows him smoking crack in a Washington hotel with 2 women. Mayor Barry's personal and political problems have cast a pall over the entire Washington community, leaving a void of leadership at a time when the D.C. government is faced with critical policy decisions.
Washington has become the murder capital, most of it drug-fueled. And we still face many difficult days ahead, and we have a lot of healing to do.
Residents are worried that the mayor's problems will encourage Congress to step in and exercise more control and quash recent efforts by the city to become independent of federal overseers.
I think it's very unlikely that statehood's going to go very far in the midst of this.
Returning to the White House this evening, the president was sympathetic to the mayor. Mayor Barry has indicated that he will seek treatment for his problems, but critics say the big question left untouched today is what happens to the city while he's in treatment, and whether or not Barry should resign. Norman Robinson, CBS News, Washington.
A lesbian couple and a homosexual man were installed today as ministers in the Lutheran Church, both in clear defiance of church policy and risking expulsion. John Blackstone reports.
The First United Lutheran Church in San Francisco this morning did something no Lutheran church has ever done before. It accepted and admitted homosexual as a clergyman. This small neighborhood family parish is defying a ban on homosexuals in the clergy demanded by the Lutheran hierarchy. The congregation could be expelled from the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. But it is not standing alone.
And I now want to welcome you as part of the pastoral team here at St. Francis.
Later this morning, another San Francisco church, St. Francis Lutheran, installed 2 women as co-pastors. They are Ruth Frost and Phyllis Zilhart, a lesbian couple.
Ruth and I are in a committed, lifelong relationship. We see each other as healthy, happy partners, as hopefully little old ladies someday.
But the Lutheran Bishop of San Francisco sees nothing healthy about the appointment of homosexual ministers. In a prepared, videotaped statement, he said disciplinary charges will be filed.
We find ourselves in a very unpleasant situation, forced upon us by circumstance.
The action in San Francisco that promises to lead to debate and division in the Lutheran Church nationally began with a rebellious ordination service yesterday, a service that sometimes seemed designed to shock. All 3 of the newly ordained ministers graduated from Lutheran seminaries, but they say they refuse to hide their homosexuality.
We claim our spiritual voice. We're not going to leave. We're not going to be quiet. We are going to stand up with integrity and with honesty.
The church hierarchy says its ban on practicing homosexuals in the clergy does not violate anyone's civil rights, that ordination is not a right but a privilege granted to those who follow established church standards. Members of the rebellious congregations in San Francisco say church standards will change only when they're forced to change. John Blackstone, CBS News, San Francisco.
House Speaker Tom Foley warned today that a proposed cut in the Social Security tax would mean a big increase in the deficit. If a vote were held today, Foley said, he'd vote against the cut. Senate Democratic leader George Mitchell hasn't made up his mind on the Social Security tax, but he took a shot today at the president's plan to cut the capital gains tax.
The administration's tax policy can be summed up in a sentence. Let the little people pay cut taxes for the wealthy. I think that's wrong and unfair.
The debate over election year tax cuts moves from the airwaves to Capitol Hill this week as the second session of the 101st Congress convenes. Coming up next on the CBS Evening News, officials in Azerbaijan demand the withdrawal of Soviet troops. And later, New Hampshire's controversial plan for producing Rhodes Scholars. Soviet troops apparently have gained the upper hand tonight in the battle-torn capital of Azerbaijan. The Soviet commander said at least 83 people were killed in fighting against Azerbaijani nationalists. Others say the toll is much higher. More from Barry Peterson.
The Red Army was back in control of Baku. The troops surrounded the main square. Local Azerbaijani officials today demanded that the troops be pulled out, that the curfew and other emergency measures be lifted, that Azerbaijanis be put back in control. It was a request the Soviet Army was unlikely to grant anytime soon. And already the debate is beginning. Did Soviet troops shoot only to defend themselves, or did they open fire indiscriminately, killing dozens of innocent people? And already there are accusations against Soviet leadership for sending in the army. Accusations and anger. At a Moscow news conference, an Azerbaijani spokesman and former member of the Soviet Politburo called the decision a mistake made at the highest level. Azerbaijanis marched through the streets of Moscow in protest, their signs attacking Mikhail Gorbachev by name. In a small Azerbaijani city, they hung flags with black ribbon, and thousands gathered in the main square to quietly mourn the dead of Baku. The story was unfolding differently in Nakhichevan, an area surrounded by Armenia but populated by Azerbaijanis. Army officers were negotiating with local leaders who had claimed independence from Moscow. The result? A friendly stalemate and no shooting yet. It was a day of worship for Christians, worship laced with sadness and grief for a civil war that is not over. The toll on the hillsides continues to mount. Muslim and Christian guerrillas, sometimes from neighboring villages, gunning each other down. In Armenia today, a funeral for a leader of one guerrilla group, his men parading in respect. And at his graveside, a demonstration from his followers that they are more than ready to keep fighting and to keep killing. Barry Peterson, CBS News, Moscow.
Thousands of Armenian Americans today blamed the bloodshed on their traditional ethnic enemy and defended the role of Soviet troops. Richard Roth has that story.
Loud and angry and often sad, the echo of communal violence half a world away was heard in American cities today. Armenian immigrants and exiles and descendants in this country were raising their voices and their fists and the flags of their homeland. 1 million or so people in America call themselves Armenian. In New York today, they said the violence in the Soviet Union was the fault of Muslim Azerbaijanis.
This is to show the world that we are the innocent victims and they are the aggressors. They took our territories and now they want to kill us.
In Washington, Armenian Americans delivered a letter to the Soviet embassy.
We definitely support the idea that the Soviet troops are in Azerbaijan to restore law and order in the region.
But they criticized Moscow for not doing enough. They want territory back from Azerbaijan and assurances of safety. Armenians rallied too in Los Angeles today, where their numbers are greatest. There is no comparable community in America of Azerbaijanis, though both sides of the decades-old dispute claim a monopoly on right and justice. In suburban Chicago, Armenians gathered in church. A ceremony of mourning, said a participant, and an expression of solidarity. Theirs is a community bound by faith, thinking of a struggle between faiths half a world away. Richard Roth, CBS News, New York.
Thousands in Soviet-dominated Mongolia defied a government ban on protests today. The demonstrators heard speakers demand political reforms and respect for human rights. East Germany's former leader Egon Krenz was expelled from the Communist Party today. It was Krenz who opened the Berlin Wall last November. He lasted only 6 weeks in power. Czechoslovakia's President Václav Havel will be visiting the superpowers to discuss troop withdrawals from Europe. Havel reportedly will go to Moscow by the end of this month and to Washington 2 weeks later. "17 years ago tomorrow, the Supreme Court legalized abortion. Today, pro-life activists around the country demonstrated against the decision. Some 20,000 people rallied at the Oklahoma Capitol, urging legislators to outlaw abortion in the state. Wisconsin could soon become the first state to require the labeling of dairy products that come from cows treated with a hormone known variously as BST and BGH. The drug is designed to produce more milk. But as Gary Reeves reports, it's also producing health concerns.
To a starving world, this must look like a miracle drug. It's BGH, the bovine growth hormone that stimulates cows to make more milk. But because this is artificial BGH, made in a laboratory by splicing genes, it has hit a brick wall of controversy in the United States, despite manufacturers' claims that it is perfectly safe.
The product is no different from milk that is from cows not treated with BST.
Apparently, the Federal Food and Drug Administration agrees. It may soon approve BGH for general use, despite critics' claims that the FDA relies too heavily on data supplied by the companies that make the artificial hormone.
It's a very risky business to let the company that's going to make the money decide whether the product is safe.
Come on, come on. Come on.
What Kinsman really fears is that widespread use of BGH would cause a milk glut, driving some small dairies out of business.
Come on.
But Dan Swagger, who has been testing BGH on part of his herd, sees the drug as an easy way to get more milk from fewer cows.
I see no problem with using BST on my herd. All the cows we've been using it on for 3.5 years show no signs of adverse health reactions.
But fear of adverse health problems has prompted some stores to ban BGH milk.
The last thing consumers want in this country is to have milk that contains residue of bovine growth hormone from gene splice technology.
Nevertheless, later this year, the FDA could make BGH the first gene-spliced product available for general consumption, a step supporters say would open the door to more productive farming worldwide. But because so little is known about the long-term effect of this new technology, critics fear that what it really opens is Pandora's box.
Come on.
Gary Reeves, CBS News, Atlanta.
New Hampshire lawmakers think they found a way to boost the high school graduation rate. The state Senate has just given its approval to a bill that would deny a driver's license to teenage dropouts. Victoria Corderi reports on the auto motivation for staying in school.
It's a rite of passage for every teenager.
I really want my license. I've been waiting forever.
But here in New Hampshire, 16-year-old Mary Neal may have to continue waiting if she drops out of school.
Last year, I didn't care about school. I just came to, like I said before, be with my friends, talk. I failed everything.
And that's why New Hampshire legislators are pushing a new approach to make potential dropouts like Mary stick it out until graduation. No diploma, no driver's license until they're 18.
It's a carrot to help people understand the benefits of a good education.
The proposal is controversial and has failed twice in New Hampshire, which has the second worst dropout rate in the nation.
Angrier youngsters do not become motivated to learn. Quite the opposite occurs.
The biggest organized opposition is the teachers.
Something that will be a punitive measure that will have little cost attached to it. Politicians tend to use it as a smokescreen that give the illusion that something important is happening.
But for Mary Neal, something important is happening. Next week she begins driver's education, and for now she plans to stay in school. But she's not happy about the idea of being forced.
Getting your license has nothing to do with dropping out. It's like two different things, staying in school and driving a car. It's totally different things.
But they won't be if the law makes it through the legislature. The bill has been modified and stands a better chance of passing this time around. If it does, New Hampshire teens who are potential dropouts may find this rite of passage passing them by. Victoria Corderi, CBS News, New York.
A national survey of college freshmen shows they're getting more conservative on the drug issue and more liberal on abortion. The results out tonight show that 2 out of 3 now favor legalized abortion. An all-time low of less than 17% believe marijuana should be legalized. The United States and 17 other countries meet Tuesday in Geneva to discuss what to do with thousands of Vietnamese refugees stranded in Southeast Asia. Reaching American soil is often a matter of timing and the prevailing political winds. More from our State Department correspondent Bill Plant.
This is a poignant moment for Thuy Le Tran, her husband Cao Wan Ching, and their 4 children, all refugees from Vietnam, reunited with their families 15 years after the fall of Saigon. She worked for the U.S. military. Her husband, a South Vietnamese Army officer, was sent to a re-education camp. They were among the thousands of Vietnamese detained by the Hanoi government because of their close ties to the U.S. during the war. In effect, political prisoners.
When I come here, I feel very happy.
It took 7 years for the U.S. to get that deal with Vietnam to release these refugees who had given America their loyalty when it was at war in Vietnam. It took that long partly because there were other issues the U.S. considered more urgent, the POWs and the MIAs, for example. But the humanitarian business of helping refugees, any refugees, always seems in practice to become political.
The way to understand the politics of U.S. refugee programs is to follow the money. Where does the money go?
These days, a lot of the money is going to help resettle refugees from Eastern Europe, and particularly the Soviet Union.
As we have responded to the politics, the need, the almost irresistible need and desire to resettle refugees from the Soviet Union, we have necessarily diverted resources from other refugees.
There's only so much money in the pot. Winter and other critics argue that it costs far more to resettle thousands of refugees in the U.S. than to feed and protect millions of refugees in the Third World. But the primary goal of U.S. refugee policy is to be able to offer asylum to those who need it.
There must be some resettlement of persons who do not have a possibility of ever returning to their homes.
That's why Tran and her husband Chin are finally here, settling in for a family dinner less than 24 hours after their arrival.
All I would see from him is skin and bones. So we try to feed him good over here so he can gain back his normal weight.
This family survived refugee politics. They are among the lucky ones whose story has a happy ending. Bill Plant, CBS News, Washington.
A state of siege exists tonight in Haiti imposed by military ruler Prosper Avril. At least 2 prominent opposition leaders were deported in surface today in Miami. They were among dozens of opposition figures arrested following the murder Friday night of an Army colonel. In her career, Barbara Stanwyck was nominated for 4 Academy Awards. She won 3 Emmys and the admiration of fans and colleagues alike. Her death came last night at the age of 82. David Browning looks back at her life.
In that corner of the American imagination where the old movies unwind, Barbara Stanwyck has long held a special place.
You've been here 3 times and you haven't propositioned me once.
Is that unusual?
It's impossible.
No one was better at playing the girl who'd been around. Feisty, frank, with a voice that could cloud men's minds.
Where did you learn that?
In Pittsburgh.
It was Brooklyn where she really learned about hard knocks. An orphan at 4, Broadway dancer at 15, then Hollywood.
I never go to parties.
Oh, it's too bad.
Her first couple of films were flops until award-winning director Frank Capra took her under his arm.
He taught me what film could do for me and what I could do for film. He took me to the editing room, the property room, and then each day was a learning process. And it was wonderful.
Oh, you don't know what you've done to me.
I'm terribly sorry.
Oh.
She played opposite Hollywood's greatest leading men, Henry Fonda, Gary Cooper. Remembering Capra's advice, the eyes he taught her, on the screen, the eyes say it all. By the 1940s, she made more money than any other woman in America and gambled by taking on riskier roles. Murder victim in Sorry Wrong Number. Killer in Double Indemnity.
We went into this together and we're coming out at the end.
When Billy Wilder sent me the script of Double Indemnity and I read it, I said, I love the script and I love you. But I'm a little afraid after all these years of playing heroines to go into an out-and-out cold-blooded killer. And Mr. Wilder, and rightly so, looked at me and he said, well, are you a mouse or an actress? And I said, well, I hope I'm an actress. He said, then do the part.
Goodbye, baby.
In real life, Barbara Stanwyck married twice, once to actor Robert Taylor. Over the years, as the movie roles dwindled, she cheerfully moved on into television. And in Hollywood, where big egos and bad manners flourish, she had neither. She was polite, prepared, telling visitors to the set her secret: learn your lines, be on time.
You have to earn something before you can be it. And earn it. And the way you earn that is by applying yourself.
Even when Barbara Stanwyck was 80 years old, her looks and her bearing could turn heads in a room full of movie stars. She was genuinely admired on screen and off as smart, tough, and beautiful.
Jonesy, you're quite a gal.
She will be genuinely missed. David Browning, CBS News, Hollywood.
And that's our news. Dan Rather will be here tomorrow night. And be sure to join Bill Plant later tonight on the CBS Sunday Night News. I'll see you again, not next week, that's Super Bowl weekend, but in 2 weeks on Saturday night at 10 p.m., 9 Central and Mountain. Thank you for joining us and for all of us at CBS News. Good night.